Hello everyone, welcome to episode 22 of my POA podcast, Black Hand and Beyond. I'm Kent Rourke, your host, and tonight's episode is about the International Show and National Congress Grand Champion Stallions. So there has been 63 national shows starting in 1959 until just a month or two ago in Tulsa with the 63rd show. So there's been a lot of grand champions we need to talk about. Of course, some of them have repeated, so there's not 63 different winners. There's about, I think, 53 different stallions have won the title. There's been many of them that won 2 times, repeated, or came back and won, and a few years later. And then, of course, there was one stallion, the famous East Acres Double Tough, who won 4 times. No stallion has ever won 3 times. So there's been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them win twice, and then Double Tough won 4 in a row, the only 4 national shows he ever attended. So we have a lot of photos tonight. I want to thank Barb Fearmeyer from Ohio. Well, she was from Ohio. She lives in Florida now. She's a very good POA historian. She knows the 60s and 70s very well of POA history, a lot of Michigan and Mideast history. And then, of course, Rhett Bachman, he's on Facebook. He's one of my friends. Again, a very good, knowledgeable about POA bloodlines and who did what back then. And then they both helped me with pictures today. And then Jeremy Stevens, my friend from Kansas, he's always willing to help me out with pictures and stuff. And time got away from me a little bit because of, even though I had 2 weeks, I just kind of messed up. And once I leave for work, I can't get to my collection. So he helped me with his great collection and provided some pictures of some of these stallions you're going to see tonight. Every picture you will see tonight is a grand champion. 2 of them are grand champion geldings, the rest are grand champion stallions. We won't see any offspring of them or anything like that because there's still going to be 70 some pictures because I do have multiples of some baby pictures and stuff like that. So start commenting if you're on and can hear everything, and I hope you enjoy the show. It'll be a fairly long show to get through all these. We're going to start out from the beginning. Can you see me? I can see you, Tracy. The very first one to respond is Tracy. So did you get all the babies work tonight, Tracy? So I'm glad you're on here, and we're going to tune to some pictures here. So I am going to go from the beginning of the show up till now, but I am going to start with this year's winner. This is R.Y. Sudden Equity, the 2021 International Grand Champion, or National Congress Grand Champion Stallion. There's Jan Rogers is here, that's good, and a couple other people. He's owned by Pam Aid from Florida. Of course, he was bred by the Gardner family from Utah. Great breeding program, the RY POAs. Mike Gardner and his family has been breeding POAs for a long time, and we're going to talk about several of them tonight that have captured this honor of being Grand Champion Stallion. Now, we all know, if you've ever attended a show and paid attention, a national show in POAs, it's a little tougher sometimes to win Grand Champion Mare and Grand Champion Gelding. But there's just an element of something with the Grand Champion Stallion. It's the first group they do, the stallions usually. And like I say, sometimes the competition isn't quite as tough as the mares or the geldings, and that kind of dates back from the youth. A lot of the kids were showing more mares and geldings, and then they'd show them in halter. And it's still that way today, and even the younger ones. And sometimes a young yearling or a 2-year-old, with a long skinny neck or something, can give a lot more competition in the stallions than a yearling filly or a yearling gelding would do. So, and there's been a lot more yearlings win Grand Champion Stallion than a yearling win the mares or the geldings. So, again, we'll talk about this guy at the end of the show because he'll be the last stallion we talk about. So I just wanted to show the comparison here. This is the last Grand Champion Stallion, and there was the first Grand Champion Stallion. So this is Apache Brave. He was the 13th POA ever registered. He was by the 4th POA ever registered, Apache Chief. And they were both owned for a time by the Powwow Pony Farm at the time, which was Fuller Poling. He was president of the POA club. We've talked about him several times. He passed away on the way home from the Boomhauer Barrett sale. He was in a car wreck. He was headed back to Kansas from Iowa when he was in a head-on collision. But he was a big supporter of POAs, and this was his stallion and the first Grand Champion stallion. So you can kind of see the way the breed's changed a little bit. Of course, the height has changed 2 different times. The limit was 52 when this guy won. So that's our first one right there, Apache Brave. So here's a list. Hopefully this shows up clear enough. I just retyped this list of the Grand Champions. So this is from 1959 until this year, 2021. So I'm going to go through this list a little bit, but believe me, we have pictures of, thanks to the people I mentioned and myself, we do have pictures of everyone except the 1967. And if I would have dug harder, I would have found him. This is a good time to mention, you know, the tradition of the sales catalog. The Grand Champion Stallion is on the sales catalog every year, and that's been happening since 1974 without a break. Now, it did happen before that, but since 1974, there hasn't been a break. Every winner of the national show, Grand Champion Stallion, has been on the cover of the sales catalog. Of course, this year we're not going to have a sale, but I just wanted to mention that because it is a lot of history. There has been a few stallions that were not on the catalog. Danny Boy, surprisingly, wasn't in 63. The 67 and then all the way through 70, they weren't on the cover. And then 72 and 73 weren't. So MP's Big Creek's Jim Dandy appeared on the cover in 71, and we'll see that photo in a little while. And it's funny, now some of these stallions that were not on the cover did go on to be, Danny Boy would have became famous if he was on the cover or not. But on the flip side, some of the more obscure stallions in history that became the Grand Champion Stallion, throughout history they weren't as known, and they were some of them that were not on the cover. So like in 68, 7 and 69 for sure, those 2 stallions, and we'll talk about them when we see their pictures. So, okay, very clear, that's good. I don't know who put that because you're just down as Facebook user. If you want to, go to eCam Live. You don't have to do it right now, but for the future, that way I can see everyone when you're when you make a comment. Tracy, we got to put a plug in for her. She's expecting a foal by the Grand Champion, but you know, she bred to him before he won Grand, so hey, that's a good payoff right there. So we had 2 rated Royal Babies way back in the day, and we're going to see a picture of him. I only have one picture of him. Of course, he was an Appaloosa that was hard shipped into POAs. So I'm going to use my list here because it's a little clearer. But so Apache Brave was the first one, and then we have Walnut Prince that won twice in a row. And as you can see how hard it is to win twice in a row, if you go through that list then from 62 all the way down to Double Tough in 75, there wasn't a repeat winner after Walnut Prince. So I imagine people kind of thought, well, here we go, we've had the show 3 times and we only have 2 winners. But then that was all about the change, as they had a different winner every year. You had a couple full brothers there in 71 and 72, and then you had 4 generations from 63 to 74, and we'll cover that. You had 4 generations of stallions win in a short period of time. But then when Double Tough came along, of course, he was only the second one to repeat, and then he was the first one and only one to win it 3 times, and then he was the only one, of course, to win it 4 times. And then they retired him from the national show. They showed him in 79 at the World, and he won the World show, and I believe they showed him at some other shows after that, but he was never shown at the international show after 78, so he was undefeated at the international show 4 years in a row. And then as you go down there, you have some things we're going to highlight here, like the first yearling to win, and then I'll mention every time a yearling won. I believe there's been, I wrote it down, I think 12 yearlings now have won Grand Champion, and the first one wasn't until 1981. So the show was going quite a while before the first one won. Ann Dykstra's here, that's good to know. Thanks, Ann. Some of your bloodlines showing up in here as well. Some of the stuff you use, like Major Equity, the grandson of Major Equity, just won this year. So Well, we can go back to some pictures. I do have this list at the end, but if you wanted to take a snapshot of this list or something, or I don't know if you can screenshot off if you're watching on a computer or on a video like this, but just keep this list in mind, because we're going to go through all these picture-wise. So here is Apache Brave again. I'm basically going to start over with number 1. I believe he might have had a little pinto in him, if you can see some of those markings on his jaw there and on his legs. And but you know, he was a little stock pony, kind of like what they were breeding for in the early days. Just think, he was the 13th ever registered in POAs, so real early. So here's Walnut Prince, and I think he must have been pretty good in person. His picture's good. Again, remember the day. And a lot of those grays like that are the ones, like Tracy always says, you don't see that pattern anymore. Black Hand became that, where they didn't have they lost their color in the front, but they kept their big spots. And a lot of those did have pretty good heads, and I think Walnut Prince had a good head. Of course, it says here, and he was from the Walnut POA farm, which was Wilmer Ott from Great Bend, Kansas, and he bred a lot of early day good POAs. Most of them had the Walnut prefix. Rosalind's listening while doing chores. Good. Say hello to all your good POAs there and all your good animals. Okay, so this horse here, Walnut Prince, won 2 years in a row. And the second year he won, here's a couple of them that he defeated. This would have been in '61. He beat this horse, Coret's Indian Boy, and that was pictured at that show. That's what he looked like that day. And Walnut Prince also beat this horse, and that's what he looked like that day. And this is Stewart's Danny Boy. Now you got to remember, Stewart's Danny Boy competed in all the speed events and some of the other events as well. And then of course he raced. Back then they had POA racing, and he was one of the fastest POAs in his day. And he won a lot of races, set a lot of records, and a lot of times halter would be at night back then. It's not like it is now, where we start at 8 in the morning or 10 or whatever we did this year. But you know, there wasn't a full day just set aside for halters. The show didn't last a week; it just lasted a few days. It was more like a regional is now. So a lot of these POAs, it was almost an afterthought. After they got done competing, they would show in halter. So some of them that was worked real hard, like Danny Boy would, it was a little disadvantage for him in halter. But he was reserve grand in '62 to Walnut Prince. And like I say, Coret's Indian Boy was at the show. And in '62, Coret's Indian Boy did become the 3rd POA in the 4th year to win Grand Champion Stallion. And of course, he was an own son of Coret's Scottish Chieftain. And we've talked about Indian Boy before. He was with Gene Adams in Nebraska for a long time, the Star Acres. I know a lot of people remember the Star Acres POAs, and he was in the pedigree of a lot of them. He was a good-looking husky, again, a stocky pony for the day. So, and there he is as a baby. I always want to get the factor, the awe factor with that. So there he is, Coret's Indian Boy, as a little baby born in Montana to the Corets. So there's Danny Boy. This is a famous picture of him, a legendary picture of him. Of course, John Ludwig and Danny Boy, names go hand in hand, and I did an episode on them early on. And he was the 1963 Grand Champion Stallion, and he only won Grand once. He was reserve, I think, twice. I know he was reserve in '62, or '61, but his generations went on, and we're going to talk about as we see the pictures. He had a son win Grand, and then that son, and so on. So a record that still stands today. So that's a legendary Stewart's Danny Boy, the 1963 Grand Champion Stallion. Tracy just put the riding pony up. That's good. So anybody that wants to chime in here, sometimes I get too busy jabbering and looking at the pictures here, and I don't see it. But if you guys want anything you want to add or any questions, go ahead. Or if you remember stories about a horse, or somebody told you a story about one of these, go ahead and jump in. That's what this is all about. So this is Hayes Watch Charm. He was a good built POA, and he won a couple years at the show, only once Grand. He didn't really go on in history. I'm not sure what happened to him. Here it says he was in West Virginia, not really a hotbed for POAs, but he was a good-looking POA in his day, and he was the 1964 Grand Champion. So I'm not sure how many foals he sired or anything. That might be something I do someday if I go back to Indianapolis for a weekend or something and check out the stud books. Of course, I got them at home too, but just see how many each of these sired. So Eagle Rock might have been one of the, most of the people connected to these now are gone, so I don't want to hurt any feelings, but, he was one of the poorer built stallions that won early on. This was already 65, so the POAs were starting to change a little bit. People were already putting horse blood in them and stuff, so, he had more of the thin tail and just not really the stock, even the stock pony build as we'd seen already a couple years earlier. But he was the 1965 winner, Eagle Rock. And this is probably the worst picture of this horse that I've seen out of 20 pictures, but this is the picture they had on the sales catalog. And this is Tomahawk's Big Creek. He's an own son of Driftwood's Stewart's Danny Boy. I'm jumping the gun there. So that would be the first father-son, 63 and 66. Father and son won grand. I included some other pictures of him because, like I say, it shows how stocky he is, but he was a great performer too. He was a supreme champion, and just like his sire, he became a great sire. Of course, he was bred by John Ludwig, and then he broke the record when the Murfelds bought him, and then he broke the record again when Murfelds sold him to Slagle's, and I believe Lutke was a partner, but Harold Slagle did a lot with him, and his kids rode him. Here's a better picture of him. To me, that looks like more of a modern day POA for a stallion that won in 1966. He was quite a dude, and an own son of Danny Boy, so he had ability in his genes to perform and to run. So 1967 is missing because that's a POA that we don't know much about. I did see a picture of him one time. Again, I kicked myself. I should have got it. I think I seen it in a catalog. Not the year he won, but he was consigned. He was older. But Carlisle Osceola was that horse, and he won in 1967 when it was in Blue Earth, Minnesota. Lynn Puffenberger talks about a story. They were leasing Chief Little Britches, and then they bought him that year, his family, but all his kids were showing at that show in Minnesota, and he was reserve grand that year. He was reserve grand a couple times, Chief Little Britches. He never won grand. Of course, he was in the small class, and as we'll find out tonight, it's tough for the small stallion to go on and win grand. But anyway, he's told me a story many times, and I know he told Jeremy this story too, about the judge pulled out Chief Little Britches and Carlisle Osceola several times and went back and forth, and then he picked the horse that won, and Little Britches was reserved. Of course, Little Britches went on to be a famous POA and the first Supreme Champion stallion. And in history, Carlisle Osceola, I'm sure a lot of people watching tonight's never heard that name until tonight. So, of course, I've known it since I was 10 or 11 because I memorized this list. So I pretty much still have this list memorized. I'm almost 50 now, so life's kind of got in the way. Once in a while I stumble, but him and the 69 winner was always the toughest to remember. Now, Chief Tequila was with the same people for a while, Wernz from Indiana, that had Bear Paw. So there was a lot of promotion with Chief Tequila, but Bear Paw kind of outshadowed him as a sire. But he did end up to sire a few that won. Especially at the national show, he had at least one winner. And this was him in August of 1967 on the cover. So this was before he actually won grand. And he wasn't on the sale cover either. He was one of them that chose not to. Ladies Warrior was on the sales cover that year, and it'd be kind of interesting to see the story there, why, if they had a bid or how Ladies Warrior got on the cover that year. Okay, Barb says, Buddy Kennard from Ohio owned Osceola when he won and was shown by Bob Zimmerman. There you go. See, that's why I'm glad Barb's watching. I had a good conversation with Barb on the phone today. First time I ever talked to her. Thanks for reaching out and giving me a call. I had to reach out to her and Rhett earlier today about pictures because I know they have connections with the Totems POAs, and they have some pictures that I just didn't have time to pull out of magazines. So 68's covered, that's Chief Tequila. We go to another stallion that's not very well known, and this picture's probably not been really publicized. He looks like a pretty cool early day POA. He's got a nice headset there and a nice neck. I remember they weren't putting a lot of hip on him back then. The quarter horse was just starting to come in. There was still a little bit of Arab influence, Arabian influence. But this is Hideaway's Aristocrat, and Aristocrat. So kind of a fitting name, Hideaway and an aristocrat, because he was kind of, he just didn't get that known. People might come on here now like Barb and stuff and say they remember him very well, but I'm saying throughout time as a historian, his foals and generations and stuff didn't live on as much as like Danny Boy or Double Tough or some other grand champions. So somebody said they knew Chief Tequila. Who said that? I knew Chief Tequila. That might be, we'll see who said that. But anyway, this is your 1969 winner, Hideaway's Aristocrat. And if somebody remembers him or remembers some of his foals, go ahead and make a comment. Now you got to remember the show moved around a lot too. The first 3 or 4 years it was in Mason City, Iowa. Then it outgrew the facility, and they had big board meetings about it, where to move it to, and they were scared about moving it, and they ended up moving it to Hutchinson, Kansas, and then they kept moving it around. Well, in 1970, they took a chance and put it out in California, and that really helped expand the POAs a lot, because a national show went out there, and a California stallion ended up winning Grand Champion Stallion. Of course, he was born in Arizona, but this is Siri Rex. So Paula Cooper bred a Siri, and he became the only Siri Grand Champion Stallion. Of course, there's been a Grand Champion gelding, but Dean Kenny was a great promoter of POAs and did a lot for POAs in California to help publicize them, and it was good that he had a chance to win with his stallion in 1970. So Siri Rex went on. He sired some winners, and he was a pretty headed POA like a lot of the series. Sue Nelson. Okay. See, other people can see the names, but I can't see the names of a lot of these people. So, okay, Sue, you knew Chief Tequila. That's cool. He was in Indiana, and I believe he was in the even further east than Indiana as well. So, somebody just said hi, Kent. Again, I can't see that. So, who it was. So here we go to 1971, and this stallion is the 3rd generation of winners. Danny Boy was his grandsire. Tomahawk's Big Creek was his sire. And in 1971, MP's Big Creek's Jim Dandy was the Grand Champion Stallion. He got his name from his famous full sister, GR's Big Creek's Dandy. So this is Jim Dandy, and it's Big Creek's, with a apostrophe S, because his sire was Tomahawk Big Creek. So even though he has the MPs, he was bred by the Stones of Iowa. Murfelds foaled him out, made him a household name. He's in the Hall of Fame now. That's young Doug showing him there. I have several pictures of him, because this one was kind of cool, because it lets you know it was in Kansas, and it tells you the 13th annual. We kind of went away from that a little bit in POAs now. We don't talk about the annuals much, but it used to be marked on the trophies and stuff. Maybe it still is, I'm not sure, but they used to put the year, what anniversary it was, because since 1959 till now, that's something the POA people should be very proud of. Well, the sale as well. I know the sale got messed up a little bit the last couple of years because of COVID, and just the way the market has changed in the world, the way you sell things nowadays. But it went on for a long time too, 57 until 19. And this show continues to grow and still prosper from 1959 to now. So that's cool. So there's MP's Big Creek's Jim Dandy and Doug Murfeld. And there's a little better picture. Same day, Doug's got his hat on now there, and a little better picture of him. Of course, he became a pretty good sire too, and we're going to be seeing one of his sons in a few minutes. This is an older picture of him. That little red dot is something that got on the catalog or the magazine. So that's when he got a little older. So here's the 1972 Grand Champion Stallion. 1972 and 73 Grand Champion Stallions were full brothers, and they were from Earl Clark's program in Michigan, northern Michigan, and he had the Totems POAs. And we're going to have an episode probably this winter about the totems, and Barb's going to help me out with that too. And we'll talk about some of the northern Michigan and some of the Michigan breeders on that episode, so it just won't be about the Clarks. But they ended up breeding 3 grand champions all around the same time: Totem Series Desert Night, Totem Series Desert Gold, and then of course Totem Spots Magella. And it's kind of cool. I'll save it for the episode, but they used about at least three different stallions or more, and they'd use Series, Sun, and Spot for whatever, kind of like the Steels did later. They would put that after their prefix so they could label the foals by what sire it was. So this is Desert Night. Again, he was the second to last one not to be on the sales cover. Him and his full brother were the last two. And in history, they didn't become quite as famous. I don't think Desert Night ever sired a national champion. I know Gold did, but I don't believe Night did. We'll have that list coming up as well. So, but they were both extremely nice colored POAs. And this is Totem Series Desert Gold. This picture is kind of special. That's the purchaser of him, Junior Reams from Missouri, the Reams POAs. He's the man that purchased the Doc Nemers colt in 1995, and he's standing almost in the same picture or same position when he bought this colt in Iowa at the international sale. That was the POA banner back there. Buy a POA today. They used that at the sale for years, hung it up. And anyway, he became the 1973 Grand Champion stallion. This isn't him there. This is him, but this is at just an Iowa show. So he was probably a year younger here than when he won, at least a year younger. But again, there's not a lot of pictures of these two stallions, but the Totems POAs made their mark in the early 70s and throughout the 70s. And we'll be discussing those more this winter. We got shows scheduled for all winter. I know right now it's kind of a tough time with the futurity coming up. So, you know, I took a couple weeks off. I'm going to try to do a show next week, but I'm not going to maybe do them every week for a while just because everybody's so busy. Once the sale's over and school just happened again, kids going back to school and parents busy with that. So, but that's why I decided to take a couple weeks off. But I have a lot of topics, and again, everybody that's watching, we usually have 300 to 500 views now. Our first 3 or 4 shows, we had 3,000 to the first 5 or 6 shows had over 1,000 views. So this summer, it's went down quite a bit. But for everybody watching, if you have ideas for a show, I know Jared Katzenberger told me one about different, you know, where are they now, basically, especially some of the POA kids that's went on to really make a name for themselves out in the world. And then, of course, the ones that became equestrians and stuff like that. So there's a lot of episodes, not just counting all the POAs and POA farms we can talk about. So this little guy here made quite a bit of history. He didn't go on to be that famous of a sire. This is Driftwood's Series Tomahawk. He was Bud Campbell's senior stallion for a long time. Now he has the Driftwoods, but he was bred by Murfelds. So Murfelds had his sire, sold the mare, and he ended up with Ray Peets. So that's where the Driftwoods comes in. So it kind of skipped a generation there. Murfelds made 1 grand for Stones, and then Bud made 1 grand for Murfelds. So, but he was the 4th generation that completed it. So in 63, Danny Boy; 66, Tomahawk's Big Creek; 71 was MP's Big Creek's Jim Dandy, and then his son was in 74. So 4 generations in a row, all stallions, and that's pretty cool feat. And then another thing that he held the record for a long time until 2016 was he was the only small stallion to come out of the small stallion class to win Grand Champion. Now, Apache Brave wasn't very big, but he didn't come out of that certain class. Later, Doc's Rough and Tough became a small stallion, but he didn't come out of the small stallion class. He was shown as a younger POA. But we'll talk about the POA that did go on to tie the record or break the record of this one. Now there's 2 small stallions that have been Grand Champions. So this was starting to be another end of the era too, the kind of short stout. He had a nice rump, like somebody just said. He was my family bought him when he was about 12 years old. We kept him for a few years, but we went the double tough route more, and Chip-a-Tough and Tough to Beat and Kiddo and stuff like that. And the year after Tomahawk won, Double Tough came on the scene, And as a 5-year-old, this was taken in Colorado. Max Nebergall, the person that hard-shipped him, had him and showed him in 75. And he ended up winning 4 years in a row. And of course, he did a lot of other things. We're not going to go into all his accomplishments. We already, I believe, episode 10 was about Double Tough. So he carried Max's prefix. Max is in the Hall of Fame now, which he should be. And he had the East Acres. But beyond that, he found great POAs. And besides just breeding POAs, he'd buy POAs and help make them famous. So I do have all 4 pictures that Double Tough won. Here's a trivia question that I don't know the answer to. I think Max showed him the first year. I know Julian Nemers Jr. showed him the second year. I believe he showed him in California too. This was in, I think, Illinois. Yeah, Northbrook, Illinois. This was in 76 when he won the second year. And then he won in 77. These are all the covers of the sales catalogs. So this was the cover in 77. I think Julian Jr. probably showed him again that year. And then I'm not sure if Julian showed him in 78 or if Doc, Julian Nemers, if he showed him in 78. But this is the picture from 78. This was on the sales catalog. So 4 years in a row, a feat that hasn't been done in the Stallions. Of course, the mares now, there's been a couple mares win 3. The current champions won 3 years in a row in the mares. And JBJ's Kid Dazzle, she tied HA's top request record. And then we've had quite a few geldings that's won 4 times or more. But 4 in a row and undefeated is 2 things that just springboarded him to become who he did in POAs. So we go on to 1979, and here's Salty 3 Bars and Lynn Puffenberger. Again, we talked about him a couple weeks ago with the Bishop program. He was bred by George Bishop. He was owned by quite a few famous POA people, including Kurt and Judy Phillips from Ohio, and then Lynn got him, was the first owner of him from George Bishop. But Lynn showed him or had him in 79 when he won Grand in Oklahoma City. Tommy, Lynn's son, showed him, and I've shown pictures of that. Of course, he became the sire of Tudor Bars, and he's an own grandson of the thoroughbred 3 Bars who made quarter horses what they are, so changed the quarter horse breed. This was a 54-inch pony who was an own grandson of him. So, at my favorite all-time, Tracy said that was for Double Tough, of course. She loves the Double Tough line. Her family owned many offspring of Double Tough, including a son and lots of daughters. Here's another stallion we've talked quite a bit about, Plata Tie Bar. Again, congratulations to his breeder, the Kleins. Barbara Klein was the breeder of him, and she just was inducted into the Hall of Fame this summer in Tulsa, so that was cool. And he was one of her many good ones. He started out as Kleins was his name, and then Ruth Pecoy changed his name to Plata Tie Bar, and he won in 1980. So this is another historical picture, so I'll pause while you take this in, drink this picture in, because I'm going to take a drink. I hope everybody's enjoying the show so far. We've had a lot of good responses, comments. So this is High Plains Drifter, and that's young Mark Bourgeon there. Of course, he was from his mom's program. Marlene Bourgeon is a great POA breeder. She doesn't get enough credit, I believe, for the POA she raised, especially conformation-wise. She's really bred some great POAs, and this is one of them. And what makes him so famous is he was the first yearling colt to stand grand at the international show, and this was in Oklahoma City in 1981. Of course, he was a son of Double Tough. He also became Double Tough's first relative to capture his title, and then after that there would be quite a few other relatives. And he was out of the great mare SS Katie. And speaking of Tracy, we just was talking about Tracy. They owned a full sister, Tough Sorrel Sunday. I never seen her in person that I know of, but I always loved the pictures of her. And this guy got a lot huskier, of course, as he got older. This is a yearling picture, and he was a beautiful color, too. I wish I had a color photo of him. I think I do, but again, I just didn't get it on this episode. So High Plains Drifter is your 1981 Grand Champion, and he'd start a string of some yearlings winning. But first, In 1982, his half-brother, Doc's Tough Dude, another Double Tough son, won. And this is actually a late yearling picture, but this was on the cover. He won in 83. He won Grand in 83. He was reserve Grand in New York when he looked like this as a yearling. And then he won as a 2-year-old, but he didn't go on to win Grand or Reserve as a 2-year-old. And in 82, as a 3-year-old, Doc's Tough Dude won Grand Champion Stallion as a 3-year-old. But this picture is not him as a 3-year-old. This is him as a 3-year-old, but this is the picture they used on the 83 catalog when he won as a 4-year-old. But that's Doc Nemers, Dr. Julian Nemers, of course, from Iowa and Wisconsin, Hazel Green, Wisconsin. He's bred a lot of great POAs, one of the best breeders of all time, and this was his first Grand Champion, and he was by his famous stallion, Double Tough. So that meant 3 years in a row, Double Tough had sons win after he'd just won. So there was only 2 in between, Double Tough winning, and then 3 years in a row, 2 sons winning. So keep that in mind when we talk about the impact Double Tough had. There's another reason that helped do it. So, yep, she's the dam to Takapa Tough. That's right, Tough Sorrel Sunday is. So also into the Double Tough era, we had the Gold Prince era, and he had his share of famous sons, and he ended up having 3 Grand Champion sons. And Gold Chips was the first one. Of course, his claim to fame before that was he was the first Select Sire Futurity winner ever. That was in 82. And then he won the show as a yearling. He was second as a baby. And then he won the show as a yearling. And then as a but not Grand. And then as a 2-year-old, he went Grand. And this is him in Des Moines in 1984, pictured as a 2-year-old. Of course, Gold Chips is a famous POA. Those 2 things right there made him really famous. And then he went on to do other stuff as well. But by Gold Prince and out of Joan and Leonard Lewis's family show mare, Miss Hydeck. So we get back to Double Tough again for 85. You're going to kind of see a theme here going back and forth a little bit between the Gold Prince and the Double Tough until they kind of merge them together. People started breeding them together. But this is Tough Jet, bred by Olin and Patsy Ziegler. They were kind of winding down their POA career. They were at the Detroit International Show in 1963. I remember them telling me when I was at the 93 Detroit show, they were pointing out streets and different things and telling me how Detroit had changed in 30 years. I'm not sure if people realize that, but the show was 30 years apart in Detroit, Michigan. So 63 and then again in 1993. So Tough Jet was a beautiful POA stallion. Chris Woods, a famous horseman and auctioneer from Ohio, showed him for Ziegler's in 85 and again in 86, but he did win Grand in 85 as a yearling. So he'd be the second yearling. There he is on the January cover of 86, and that's Olin there, his breeder, holding him. But he was a beautiful, modern-looking POA. Had Jet Bar 2 was his sire, so he had Easy Jet in him. So again, through Appaloosas, but the quarter horse bred in Appaloosa, or a grandson of his did, and that's how it came down. And then again, another mare that Tracy's family owned, Foxy Acres Double Ditto, a Double Tough daughter, was his dam. Okay, so before we get on to 1986, when things really started changing, now you gotta remember the height changed in 85, but the first year to show with the new height was 86. So I thought this would be a good time, since the stallion that won in 86, Tough Plotted, is on the top of this list. And this is just a list I made. I don't believe I forgot anybody. If I omitted someone, I apologize. But these are the Grand Champion stallions that sired international show or national congress winners. Now, of course, we have some that are still young, so it's not fair to judge them, and I don't want any negative comments about this list anyway. You know, it's like anything. There's always going to be some that dominate and some that don't do as well. But I just thought this was a cool list, and I left the first 6 there with their numbers. That's the number where they stand on the overall list of national champion sires, and we had an episode about that, I believe, on episode 17. So Tough Plotted is ranked 3rd. Salty 3 Bars is 11th. Rough and Tough 20th. Doc's Tough Dude 22nd. Double Tough 25th. And Pal Chip and Putt 40th. But on this list, this is just Grand Champion stallions and how they fared as sires. So as you can see, this list isn't as big as the list we just seen with 53 stallions. So I believe there's been 36 sires, 36 Grand Champions that actually sired winners, which is pretty cool. I mean, some of them were gilded, some passed away, some just didn't get in the right program, or some just weren't that good as sires. You know, it's just one of those things. So, oh, that's pretty cool. Barb said the last foal I raised was by Tough Jet. That's cool, Barb. I never knew that. You told me today you bought a lot of POAs from Ziegler's. I got to see Tough Jet in Ohio. I seen Levi and Tough Jet when they were both pretty young when we took a trip when I was a young kid, and we picked up Oz of Sweet Speculation at Phillips, and we swung by Ziegler's and got to see Landon Sweetheart and some of their great POAs. Like I say, right before they dispersed a couple years after that. So again, getting back to this list, you see there how Tough Plotted, you know, he's number 1, and he was also the first few spot to win Grand Champion, I believe. The first when they started identifying few spots. We just looked at all the pictures but one, and now there's been a few spots since then to win, and they're related to Tough Plotted, I believe. So Salty 3 Bars, of course, and then you have Rough and Tough won twice, and Dude won twice, and they're both 2 of the top sires of the Grand Champions. Then you go down that list, you have some we're going to talk about yet, like Campbell's Dreamcatcher and Senator, and some of these numbers could go up yet for some of these stallions because they're not done. Some of them might be gone, but their foals are still showing too. So, and you go all the way down that list to JBJ's Locked and Loaded, just won in 15, and he won as a yearling, I believe. So he did, yes. So he's still pretty young as a sire. He's just getting out there. So there again, just take that list in if you can make a copy of it. I don't think that list exists anywhere else. You're not going to find it on a site or anything. So it may be posted on POA History on Facebook. All right, so we're going to move on, and here is, okay, this is something I'm going to talk about that's kind of funny. So every picture you're going to see tonight is a Grand Champion, but 2 of them, including this guy, which most people should know who that is, but I'll talk about him, and this guy, these both were Grand Champion geldings. This is Mr. McHugh, and this is Rutledge's Yoka Chiggerpep. And the claim to fame they have, besides both being Grand Champion geldings, of course, Yoka Chiggerpep is one of the most famous POA geldings of all time, but they're both on the list as sires of national champions. They both had foals. He only had 1 registered foal, S.A.'s Covera Chiggerpep, or whatever his name was. Yoka Chiggerpep did, or maybe it was S.A.'s Yoka Chiggerpep. He was a roan, and he won classes at the national show, and he was sired by this Grand Champion gelding, and I think that happened when he was like a yearling or something. And then of course Mr. McHugh was used as a stallion for a while, but he also went on to be a Grand Champion gelding. So I just threw these 2 in here to show, well, there's two Grand Champions, but they weren't stallions that had winners. So now we get to the stallion that was on the top of that list we just looked at. He's the 1986 International Grand Champion stallion. The first year it went to 56. This picture was taken before that. This would have been in 83, I believe, when he was 3. And he's a little pudgy in this picture, Tough Plotted. And of course he was bred by Leonard and Joan Lewis, the same people that bred Gold Chips. But he was made famous by Gene Carr, and he was in partners with Gene Carr and Larry Munger from South Dakota. But Gene Carr, you know, really promoted him and put him in his Santee program, and really made the Santee program one of the top in the country using this few spot. And now here he is the day he won in Oklahoma City in 1986. And that year they actually called it Superior Grand, and it's the only year they did it. Because of the height change, they did a grand for small, for medium, and large, and then they all got together. That's why there's 4 plaques there instead of 3. So if you ever wonder, because he wasn't shown in most colorful, he was a few spot. There wasn't youth halter back then. So just in case you're wondering, that's why there's 4 plaques, because he had to win 4. And they did away with that in '87, so it only lasted 1 year. But of course, Tough Plotted, we talked about him in the Gold Prince episode. We'll talk about him on his own episode or on the Santee episode down the road, because he did a lot in history. But here he was more of a sire than he was a show horse, because he was a few spot and he was pasture bred a lot. So, but he did go to the 1 international show and stand grand. So after him, because of the height change, we had an Appaloosa that was hard shipped, and this is and he won twice. He won in 1987 and again in 1989. And this is his picture from 1989. That would have been out in Indianapolis, Indiana, as it says on the sign there. And he was owned by Leon Chastain and his family. Leon was a longtime editor in the late 90s and early 2000s of the POA magazine, and they owned Rated Royal. He's an own son of Royal Exhibit, and believe he was hard shipped by Ruth Pecoy. She's the person that found Rated Royal. Then he made his way to Indiana with the Chastains. Tracy says, so many chigger peps. We had a mare that produced Congress champion that was a pep bred mare. Okay. Leon, I miss him. Yep, Leon was a good friend of mine. I did a lot of writing for the magazine when Leon was the editor, so we talked weekly pretty much. He always had to call me about the deadline. He was kind of late on deadline sometimes, and that fit me just right, because I was usually writing the night before his absolute deadline, so getting an article done for him. So sometimes when I first started writing for the magazine, I'd literally send it to Indianapolis. That's a while ago, but now you can just click and it's there. But I used to actually send it in the mail when I first started. So again, this is Rated Royal. He was a good looking horse. He was a small Appaloosa that was actually registered and then hard shipped as a POA, and he won twice. In between his 2 titles was a Damon bred POA. Avatar's Mucho won in 1988. Mucho had been shown heavily as a yearling by the Shocker family, and they won grand with him in 1988. This is a good Gary Hamilton photo here. It's a little, it's been copied several times, but I want to give the professional photographer his due, because the original is a very nice photo. And Avatar's Mucho was on that list. He's a son of Hive Avatar, and again, a product from the Damons in Iowa. And he was a pretty good sire and a good show horse. So he was your 88 grand champion. We already covered 89. So we go, speaking of Damons, here's Dean. He purchased Doc's Rough and Tough for, I think, $825 as a weanling at the national sale from Doc Nemmers, and turned around and won the international show grand champion stallion in 90 and 91. So he was the 3rd yearling to win grand, and he's the only yearling that come back so far to win as a 2-year-old or win anything, after that, win the international after his yearling year. So he was never shown again at the national show after his 2-year-old year. He won the world in 93 in the small stallion class. That would have been his first year eligible. So look at the little head and neck on him. Of course, he helped propel Kiddo Tough into fame. He became Kiddo Tough's one of his first champions. The Crisco Kid was born first, and then him. But Doc's Double Zip was a heck of a mare. Anybody today would love to have Doc's Double Zip in their pasture. She's a 1986 mare. Doc lost her pretty early. She had a full sister solid, which, she wasn't, because the Kiddo Tough's a few spot, but she was born solid. She passed away young, too. She was a short little filly, built like Rough and Tough and petite. And unfortunately, Doc lost both those mares pretty young. So here's a colored photo of Rough and Tough winning in 91. There's Dean again, a lot of hardware there he collected over the years. Of course, he had a lot of homebreds that won, like we showed Avatar's Mucho, but he also did well with Rough and Tough, conditioning him, and winning 2 years in a row. So it kind of started a trend. You had the red little yearlings winning in Here was another one. He wasn't little, but Bounce Back Jack won as a yearling in 1992, and he would be the 4th yearling to win. I'm going to lose track pretty quick of how many yearlings, but I know there's 12 altogether. He was bred by my family, but he was foaled out by Jeff Schumacher, and then the Canton family is the family that made him grand. So Carmen Hoffman, she was Carmen Winey, then she was the handler of him when he won. Of course, legendary Oz of Sweet Speculation was his mother. And he went on to be a great, POA for the Caswell family. He sired a lot of POAs that they sold to home friends and stuff like that, and people around there. They became kind of saddle club POAs and trail riding POAs, but some of them went out and showed, like Ultimate Bounce was one of them. So, but he's your 1992 Grand Champion stallion. 93 was again another yearling. This is frankly fantastic. I'm not going to go into all the stories, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say I was sitting in the stands watching this in 93, and he actually was like 3rd or 4th place in the yearling colt class. And just the calamity errors, judges errors and scoring errors and DQs with back numbers happened, and this guy ended up winning the yearling class, and then he pushed all the way to Grand Champion. And this is frankly fantastic. And it's kind of funny because his half-brother is High Plains Drifter. So they're out of the same mare, SS Katie, and they were both bred by Marlene Bourgeon. So you got 12 years apart, half-brothers on the dam side, which is unusual. The sire's side's not as unusual, but on the dam side, both winning as yearlings. And of course, that's Jill Ellsworth there. Hold'em, she was the handler. So here's Santee Gold Hancock. There's been a lot of famous Santee POAs. We think of, a lot of grand champions, but Santee Gold Hancock was the first stallion of the Santees to win. He didn't become as famous stallion as a lot of them that didn't win grand, but he won the title at the Shelbyville show, the first Shelbyville International in 1994. Of course, he's a tough-plotted son, and then Santee Rose Hancock was a great mare for Gene, and he was shown by Darren McBride at the time. She later became Darren Vincent, great POA exhibitor and an all-around horse person, judge. And of course, he was owned by the Allens that were from, I believe, Mississippi, and then they moved to California. So the Double D's is the Allens ranch, POA farm. So we have another hardship. That brings us to something. There's been 3 of the POAs that won multiple times were hardshipped, and that's of course Double Tough, Rated Royal, and then this stallion here, Mr. Respect, which I always spell his name out Mister, but here they got it Mr. I guess it doesn't really matter. Of course, he's a son of Mr. Ree, who was a grandson of Goer, and that brought some good Goer blood into POAs, a great Appaloosa stallion. Of course, Cliff and Joanne Thomas and their sons from California promoted and showed Mr. Respect. He ended up in the Hall of Fame in 2010, and he won grand 2 years in a row. 95, I believe he was 2 in 95, and then this picture here in 96. He won in Gordyville, was in 95, then the first year of a 3-year run in Tulsa, he won in 96 in Tulsa. This is Future Gold. He was bred by Jan and Dean Rogers. That's Dean Hold'em. That's not the year he won grand. This is 96, but the cover of the catalog was so ghostly looking and kind of faded out. It wasn't good the day it was printed. The cover wasn't. Nothing wrong with the horse or anything. It just was a bad print job. So I decided to use this color photo instead when he was a year younger. And his name was changed by Tom Lockwood. Changed his name to Future Gold. He was a promoter and businessman, and he thought that would promote a little better. Of course, he was a son of Takapa Gold, so he won actually before his famous sire did. His sire had been reserve grand many times, but he hadn't yet won grand when this horse won grand in 1997. Hopefully Jan's watching tonight because this is one of hers. And Tracy said, and back to Mississippi. Yeah, so I thought that they ended up moving back to Mississippi. So the double, anything DBLs like that, that was from them. So here's another yearling that won Grand. Future Gold wasn't a yearling when he won, but this horse here was. Of course, this is Pal Chippenputt. He was bred by the Kennedys from Nebraska at the time, John and Bunny Kennedy. That's, of course, Pat Burton showing him there. And I call this is going to be our Pat Burton scrapbook starting now, because he's going to be in a lot of these pictures after 1998. He showed a lot of stallions. Some of the stallions pictures we're going to show, he's not at the lead, but he actually was the man that led him into the ring and won. But some of the photos are not going to show that. But this was, he owned this colt, of course. He bought him as a baby at the national sale and showed him all over the country as a yearling. He won Grand pretty easily as a yearling. You know, beautiful stallion, and they called him Tiger, of course. And Pal Chippenputt's blood's still around today. He's got grandsons that's won and stuff like that, won national titles. We'll get to that towards the end of the show. So that's your 98 grand champion. And there he is when he got a little bit older. He's not all the way mature there, but he's a beautiful necked and beautiful, just a great POA, but beautiful headed stallion. Really helped propel Santee Cody and the PAL POAs onto a top, prestigious program as they became. So here's your 1999 Grand Champion Stallion, and this is Santee Senator. He'd become the second Santee Stallion to win Grand. That's Paul Filson showing him. Paul had picked up 3 weanlings and some mares. His wife picked out some mares from Gene's program, and they picked out 3 babies, and Noches and Shadow and Senator was the 3 babies. Filson's only lived 8 miles from where my family had our place in Dassel, but they actually lived about 1.5 miles or 2 miles from where I grew up. And Paul became the ag teacher for a while at my school, but I was already gone. I was been gone 3 or 4 years. When I wish he would have been the ag teacher when I was in school, because as a sophomore, I created the horse judging team. It hadn't existed in that school yet, and I went and recruited kids that I knew had horses, and we went on to be second in state one year, and ended up with 8 kids on 2 teams, and we started with just me and a couple people I knew. So, but anyway, getting off track. But this is Santee Senator. He was 3 years old in this picture. Probably arguably one of the best built POAs to ever win the title. Of course, he was conditioned really nice. Filson's professionally conditioned horses. They raised Appaloosas. Now they have some paints too in Kimball, Minnesota. And they had him looking the part. Santee Senator. And we're going to hear about him a little later, because he had a grandson that actually won Grand Champion Stallion. So here's Takapa Gold. I wrote an article about him, 10th time's a charm, because the day this picture was taken was his 10th international show, but the first time he was named Grand Champion. And yes, his neck's a little heavy there. It's cresty, stutty, but he was 13 years old. And he's a stallion that he'd been reserve Grand like 4 times, and he won his class 8 times. And he just couldn't get over that hump, always a bridesmaid type thing. And Burton's decided they talked to Jan and Dean one year and said, let's condition him and take him out. And they actually bred him to some mares down in Texas. Again, there's Pat holding him. And, he won in 2000 in Madison, Wisconsin, the year after Senator won. So I believe Senator only showed at 1 show, which I'm not knocking him, but, in comparison, this was his 10th show, and they retired him after that. But he was just one of those POAs, even into his late 20s. He carried a lot of mass. Of course, he was the Gold Prince son, so he became Gold Prince's 3rd son. Unbelievably, he had an 84, 86, and 2000 was the years Gold Prince's 3 sons won. There's Jan. Jan's on there. Good, Jan. Hopefully I'm not bringing you tears. If I do, it's happy tears. So that's in 2000, and we've seen a lot of cool pictures of him if you want to go back and watch the Gold Prince episode. Of course, all these episodes are still on the Facebook history page, all 21 of them, and now this one will be too. So you can go back and rewatch them anytime, and there's some cool baby pictures of him and a lot of colored photos of Takapa Gold. So now we move on to 2001, and I actually enhanced this picture a little bit. This is the sales cover. Nothing against this horse because he's a beautiful animal. Of course, Nikki's a beautiful person. This is Nikki Reinhold, but this cover was blue. The horse was blue, the cover was blue, and I changed it. And I got elected to the board right after this, and one of the first things I did was said, our sales catalogs are ghostly, they're ghastly looking, people pay to be on there, and they weren't paying as much as they have to now, and some of that's my fault, but I said we need to do something about that. And I showed a bunch of catalogs, and I said the printing and stuff. It was kind of funny because Cliff Thomas was the president at the time, and he looked down at me and seen all my research, and he said, man, you need to get a life. And Pat Burton was the director at the time, fellow director, and he said he doesn't need a life, he needs a wife. But anyway, they were, kind of picking on me a little bit, but what I did helped change things, because the next year, we're going to talk about Dreamcatcher more, but his son won the next year, and here's the catalog. So big improvement, especially if I would have left it the way the other one was. But we got it to a color catalog, and yes, it cost more money, but the covers changed so much, and it just made the catalog so much nicer. So these are probably two of the prettiest colored POAs that ever won. And again, here's another yearling, Festivus Maximus Dreams. But we're going to go back to Nikki and Dreamcatcher. He's the sire to Festivus Maximus. And of course, Campbell's Dreamcatcher was bred by Bud Campbell. We've seen a picture of him from 1974. This horse isn't related to that stallion that he showed, but Bud loved these blankets with the, especially the darker colors. And he had a black quarter mare that Sonny DuLeo or was her sire. And anyway, he got a lot of black foals by her. And then of course Campbell's Zippo became a pretty well-known stallion, and he was the sire to this guy. So Campbell's Dreamcatcher, like I say, if this photo was in color, you could tell, and a lot of people remember him so much. Yeah, Jan just put Takapa's color was yellow and awful. It was. We had several colors in a row that when they were nice colored, nice built POAs, and we just didn't have very good catalogs. So that's probably one of the best accomplishments I ever did on the 6 years I was on the board, was getting these covers changed. And I know the price went up for the owners, but it still made it look so much better. So this was Nikki's Festivus Maximus Dreams. I believe his mother is from Miss Sharon's program, Sharon Beck. I believe, if Nikki's watching, she can correct me. But of course, he is a son of Dreamcatcher. So, and he was a beautiful colored colt and just well balanced, and as a yearling, and really well conditioned. Nikki could really get POAs ready. So that was a homebred for her. So in 03, we have another son of a grand champion. This is TX's An Obvious Chip. He was an impressive bred on the bottom side. He was a son of Chip and Putt, who had won as a yearling not too much earlier, in '98. So this was his own son here. Again, there's Pat Burton, and of course that's Amy riding him, but that was a Burton bred that won in 2003. He was a 2-year-old the year he won. Here's your third Santee Grand Champion. This is Santee Scotchman. He had a lot of chrome on the front legs there, and he was a snowcap. Again, one of the rare homozygous POAs that won. I'll have to look. I believe almost every, I might be wrong, but pretty close to everyone that won was related to Tough Plotted, I think, for homozygous. But he was the first few spot, and then this was one of the first snowcaps. But he was a yearling when he won as well. And that's Eugene Zimmerman. Him and his wife Irene from Minnesota conditioned a lot of POAs for Gene and Carolyn Carr. Here's another good-looking POA that went on to be a famous, he's still showing, I believe, but a famous gelding in the POA club. And this is RBR Bunbelievable. And he was bred by the Bagwells, of course, Ray and Sue from Broken Arrow, and their daughter Lauren. And he was shown by Darren, conditioned by Darren and Tony Vincent from California. And he was a son of their famous stallion, JK Supreme Scooter, that they had a lot, so much success with. And then his mother, I believe, was a branded Wieskamp mare. If she wasn't branded, she was Wieskamp bred, but I'm pretty sure she was straight off of Wieskamp's program. So he was a heck of a stallion. and very good looking. I was tied for second in this class with against Todd Korn. He ended up second, and I was third with Salty Array, and who was by Wieskamp branded Stallions Spanish Array. And on the way home, I told Dad, "Oh, I got beat by a Wieskamp branded pedigree, so I can't feel too bad." Took another drink there. I hope everybody's enjoying the show. We're still going here a little bit. Keep commenting if you want. Tracy's commenting and other people too, so that's good. I got to say Festivus Maximus Dream, so my show's completed. So I mean, you know, it's special now. So here we go. I believe this is the last Santee stallion to win Grand. This was Santee Tradition, another snow cap, and he was owned by Maple Meadows, of course, the Patterson family. The other one, Scotchman, was owned by Gene when he won, Gene Carr, but this one had been sold. They seen him on one of Carr's videos and they bought him, and I believe he passed away fairly young, but he did win Grand as a 2-year-old in 06. This would have been the first show in Lake St. Louis. So here's Speaker of the House, and of course Tracy's one of our great followers here, and she's my fellow historian. This is her stallion. He was bred by the Astons of Georgia, of course owned by Tracy and Robert Keene. You know, I don't get to say Robert Keene too much, so there's a shout out to him. And anyway, he's a son of Santee Senator. So we just seen Senator, the leopard that won in '99. So here's his son, Blood Will Tell. And here's his son in '07. Of course, this guy's mother is a great mare and one of the best brood mares there ever was. So KS is Boogie with the Ghost, I believe is her name, but Aston's mare. And of course, that's Elisa showing him there and picking up some cool hardware. That would have been in '07. And I think she'd already mentioned that he was reserve a couple times, I think, but he did win Grand in '07, and it's so hard for few spots to win Grand. So again, he was related to Tough Blotted, the first few spot to win. So that was '07. So '08, we had an older stallion win again. He wasn't as old as Takapa, but I believe he was in double digits. And this is Nick Spittin' Image. He was bred by the Chestnuts, and he was owned by the Chestnuts when he won. Of course, that's Andy Chestnut there in the picture holding him, and Nicholas standing next to him. And we hauled this horse when we had our horse hauling business before he actually won Grand, because he was shown for years and years. Beautiful colored stallion, again, kind of a smooth built, you know, nice head and neck stallion. And I forget how old he was. I think he was 11 or so when he won in '08. And he was sired by Santee Spanish Nick. That's how he got his name, Nick Spittin' Image. So here we go. This guy's got a pedigree here. This is your '09 winner, LVO 4 on the floor. And he has a full sister that's one of my favorite mares of all time. She didn't end up to win a lot of titles, but she won some stuff. But she's just such a beautiful mare, a red mare. LVO's Respect Senorita is her name. But this is Aaron Brown showing him for the Thomas family. And his pedigree is that his sire is a 2-time grand champion stallion, Mr. Respect, so '95 and '96. And then his grandsire on the bottom side, so his dam sire, is Santee Senator, the '99 grand champion. So he had his sire and his grandsire were both grands, and then he became grand. I think he was a 2-year-old the year he won. Here's 2010. This is Eminem Mag's son of a gun. I believe he's a son of Santee Magnum. Yeah, he is for sure. And he looked a lot like Santee Magnum. They come close to winning Grand with Magnum, but they did win Grand in 2010. Kind of interesting, in 2009, Salty Array was your reserve Grand champion in 9, and in 10 the reserve Grand champion to this horse was Salty Stole the Look, owned by Jeremy and Julie Stevens. And of course, Array was owned by Lynn, both bred by Lynn. So he come close there, but he got beat out by an LVO, and then this Patterson bred, homebred stallion, M&M Mags, son of a gun. So in 2011, we had 2D's Coosa Rio won. I actually seen the stallion in person probably in July, right before the show, June or July, down at Dave Morris's house. He was bred by the Morrises. That's Bonnie standing there in the picture, Bonnie Hampton. And then, of course, Pat again showing him. This horse's head's better in person. No knock against the professional photographer, but I did take a couple headshots and I didn't quite capture it as well either, but it looks better than this picture. But again, he's kind of a profile horse, long neck and nice head. His head is way better than what this picture shows, but I probably would have did a profile shot on this horse to stand him up for the cover. But your 2011 winner was 2D's Coosa Rio, and of course he's a son of Dave's longtime Coosa son, Country Coosa, a quarter horse. So Susie Hampton, yep, that's Susie Hampton in the middle there. So here we go again, Pat Burton with pal Casey Jones. Of course, that's Kristen Fears and Sarah Bannister. They were just in the last picture together. They both longtime POA people, both conditioned POAs real well, and have an eye for good POAs. And they're friends with Pat, so that helps too. Pat's a great handler, but you know, they're behind the scenes people to get these horses ready, and both these women do that for sure. And pal Casey Jones went on to win Grand twice. He won it here as a yearling, and he was a tremendous yearling in 2012. Again, another few spot, but he's a son of Santee Cody, so Santee Cody's a son of the first few spot to win, Tough Plotted. So it's kind of funny, these homozygotes are all connected here. It's hard to win Grand at the national show when you're white. It just is. It's almost impossible for a gelding to do it. So here's your 2013 winner from the Seeks family in Iowa. This is R.Y. Zips Prestige. And of course he came from the good program of the Gardners. And nice looking POA, son of Zip and Gold. Zip and Gold ended up siring all three grand champions, a mare, a stallion, and a gelding. Here's pal Casey Jones again when he was a little older, when he won in 14. So nice picture of him there. I love that sales catalog. It looks like a wallet or something that Clint Haverty or somebody did, you know, a piece of leather work, but it was actually a cover of a sales catalog. So two-time national grand champion pal Casey Jones, and he's done well as a POA sire as well. So we're getting into the modern ones now. This is 2015, again another yearling. JBJ's Locked and Loaded. This was Jackie's first grand champion stallion, her only grand, you know, but she'd bred a lot of famous POAs at this point in her career when she got a grand champion stallion title with this colt. And he's already a champion sire. He had, I believe, a filly win in lunge line or something, I think, last year. So somebody can correct me there. So, yep, he's now with the Zoms. That's pal Casey Jones is now with the Zoms. So here we go. This is CHR. He's tough enough, and some pretty cool people in this picture. Of course, you got Pat Burton on the end, and then Tommy and Suzanne Tomlin, just the sweetest people could be. I was so glad when they won grand with the stallion, and he made history as he tied Driftwood Series Tomahawk's record. My phone was buzzing when he won because people were asking me, had a little stallion won before. Well, they hadn't won since '74. So that was a long stretch. It was like the Triple Crown winners, you know, you have 20-some, 30 years in between. So from 74 to 16 is a long time. What's that, 42 years? So, or longer than that maybe. Anyway, math's not my suit, memory is. But there is CHR, he's tough enough, homebred there for Chimney Hill Ranch in Texas, Tommy Tomlin. My favorite win, Tracy said, no one more deserving than Tommy. Yep. And again, there's Pat standing there. So here we go. This is another pal relative, but this is Will's Casey. Let's see, Will's Royal Jones. Yep, Will's Royal. I don't have to cheat. I don't have to look. It's Will's Royal Jones, but he's sired by pal George Jones, a POA stallion bred by the Kennedys and purchased by Brad Wilson. Brad's one of those sleeper breeders that you don't see a lot of advertising or hear a lot about, but he's a good breeder. He's bred some great performance POAs, anything with Wills on it, a lot of Wills, sudden this and sudden that. But he was also the breeder of this Grand Champion stallion in 2017, and that is Will's Royal Jones. And I believe he was two. He was two when he won. So in 18, we had history made again, and this is SLS Awesome All Night, and he was the first weanling to win. And I was sitting in the stands that day, and I told the group that we usually sit together, some of the breeders and ex-breeders and stuff, and I said, I think that baby's going to win it. And he did, and he's an own son of Night Moves, the famous quarter stallion, and of course he was bred by Shannon down in Texas out of her famous mare, Supreme Britches Array. She's a great mare. I think you could breed her to about anything and get a good one, but she usually crosses her to well-bred quarter horses. But he made history by being the first baby to win. Now in 1979, Hive Avatar was the reserve Grand Champion winner, and he was a weanling in 79. And then again in 82, Burnt Sugar, bred by Howard and Wanda Victor, a Plottis Crusader, one of his first or early babies, within the first three full crops anyway. Burnt Sugar was reserve grand out in Colorado in 82. So there was two weanlings that had been reserved, but there'd never been a weanling win grand. And there hasn't. Of course, geldings would be really tough, and mares would be almost impossible. So, and it's pretty impossible for a baby and the colts too. But he just looks so awesome, as his name implies. And here he is winning as a yearling. He won grand again. And here he is as more of a mature stallion. Of course, he's still not that old because he's only 3. He's an 18. So, and he's in Michigan right now. So that moves us on to another Pat Burton picture. And this is a homebred. Of course, there again, one of the best POA breeders going is Janelle Burton. And of course, her and Pat too, but she was breeding them before she married Pat. She grew up in POAs, and she's got a nice cluster of mares there, a nucleus, and she produces these good-looking POAs. And this is Take Another Look. He won as a yearling. So again, we have a yearling winner, and he would be number 12. So from 1981 to 2020, you had 12 winners that were yearlings. So Take Another Look. He showed this year in the he was gelded. So he's owned by Kathy McKenzie from Edmond, Oklahoma. And that takes us to a stallion that's not a yearling. And this is RY Sudden Equity, our current grand champion. And he's an age stallion. It was nice to see an age stallion win grand. That neck carried him a long way. Of course, he's a beautiful stallion. Now he's homozygous too. He's a snowcap. So that's good to see also. And then he also won in performance too with Pam. So they won a Western Pleasure class. So he's just a cool POA. And there he is. I took these pictures of him. The 3 pictures I showed tonight of him, I took him sitting up in the stands. So I apologize if they're not the best, but they're just taken with a cell phone. And I don't think they're too bad. But again, that neck helps him a lot. And he's your 2021 Grand Champion and the second stallion from the Gardner family to win, and their 4th Grand Champion altogether. So RY Sudden Equity. He's by RY Diamond Equity, and of course RY Major Equity, who was a good-looking stallion, you know, and possibly could have went grand in his day. He never did. There's a lot of famous stallions that never quite won grand, but that doesn't mean they weren't good stallions. You know, some of our top sires and a lot of breeds were never even shown. So there again is your 2021 champion. And we're going to end the show with the list again. So here's your list. Take it all in. all 63 years from 1959 to 2021. And like I say, there's 53 stallions recognized on there. Double Tough winning 4 years in a row, took up a lot of titles, and then the other ones that won too. So it'll be interesting to see if a stallion can beat Double Tough's record. So a lot of these yearlings that win, they don't come back to win. Some of them go on to have good careers, but they just don't come back to win. And Rough and Tough's the only one. Of course, Awesome All Night won as a baby in a yearling. So, but of the other yearlings that won, Rough and Tough's the only one to win as a 2-year-old. So that's our show tonight. Again, I want to thank Rhett, Barb, and Jeremy for the pictures. And I want to thank the Jackson's family for providing me the studio. We're at Jackson's Auto Family, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram in Enid, Oklahoma. I want to thank everyone that commented tonight. We have 261 hearts, so that's good. Tell all your friends or people that you know that they might be out of POAs. Now, I have so many friends on Facebook and stuff, people like Susie in Minnesota and Kelly, that was my guest the other day in Wisconsin. I keep track of them and talk to them through Facebook. You know, I mean, we haven't seen each other in years and stuff, but they still love POA stuff. So you might know somebody like that that doesn't even know that the POA history group exists, or that these episodes, we've had 22 of them now that they are on. So please just let them know. And we'll try to do another show next week. If not, it'll be in a couple weeks. So again, thanks everybody for watching the show, and enjoy the song.